Want an easy way to see if you could save money on car insurance? Geico gives you 3. Call 1-800-947-AUTO. Go online to geico.com or stop by the Geico office nearest you. 3 ways you could save 15% or more.
Welcome to the Right Time Podcast. The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones. And apparently I don't even know how to speak. That's how we start the Friday edition, Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. We're in for Bomani. 888-729-3776. It's 888-SAY-ESPN. You know, that's the way this whole thing starts.
Deep breath. Deep breath. It's Friday.
Sunday.
We're here. We're going to help you guys out. We got you. It's the right time. There's no remix at the beginning there. You don't have to record scratch that. You're fine. We're good.
But my microphone decided it was going to take a long dip, and I didn't go with it, Mike. You know, I'll figure this out. Someday I'll learn how to be a pro.
They always say a good craftsman blames his tools.
That is fair. That is what they always say. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. So, Mike, I think at this point I'm so flustered I don't even know what I think anymore. I think at some point we should do a radio show. That's really all I think. Ezekiel Elliott is the news of the day. It's the story of the day, and it's what everybody keeps talking about. I wanted to talk to you specifically about this because sometimes the argument and discussion around Ezekiel Elliott is about what the NFL is doing in their investigation. Sometimes it's about what the Players Association is saying in their attempt to defend Ezekiel Elliott. And through all of it, I'm trying to get the sense from someone that has been around it at this level, where you fall on it. I mean, because the NFL Players Association has an obligation to defend their player, but what happens when you're defending your player on process and your player may have been involved in stuff that's just not good? How do you handle this?
In that regard, it doesn't matter because you are defending the process and you are defending the precedents and you're defending against the power of the league. And these are all things that as a union formed in service of the players, you're supposed to do. That's why. So today, the NFLPA filed for a request for a temporary restraining order in the Eastern District of Texas, calling for the courts to block any suspension of Dallas Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott, upheld by NFL arbitrator Harold Henderson. This according to a court filing obtained by ESPN. So they're doing this. We won't know what Harold Henderson's ruling is until sometime on Sunday. I believe Sunday night is when the ruling is going to come down. So they filed for this injunction now for, I think, legal reasons to try and have whatever block this has occur in the state of Texas occur. Basically, from what I've heard, as we turn into like pseudo-legal mode here around the network and make use of guys like Will Cain, who is a lawyer in this, who is a actual lawyer in the state of Texas, or I should say, has passed the bar in the state of Texas, so holds his, license or whatever you call it in the lawyer world. Again,
we'll call that lawyering. We'll just lawyering.
Yeah, general lawyering. So listening to guys like Will Cain and others around the network talk about this and basically said there are very specific reasons why you would file for this, juncture here. But what it basically comes down to now is the NFLPA is doing this because they believe that the league's appeals process is, quote, fundamentally unfair. That's the word that's coming up here, basically saying that based on what they've found here and the process that the NFL, that was the word that came up yesterday, took throughout this, that Kia Wright-Roberts, the NFL's director of investigations, was the only one to directly interview the accuser in the case involving Ezekiel Elliott. And according to the testimony from Lisa Friel, who investigates domestic violence for the NFL, Roberts told her testimony to Friel, but was not allowed to tell it directly to the commissioner, Roger Goodell. The union is trying to say that her testimony was, in very strong words, a conspiracy. Withholding this critical information from disciplinary process was a monumentous denial of the fundamental fairness required in every arbitration and, of course, does not satisfy federal labor law's minimal due process requirements. That's a direct quote from the union. So coming out with stern wording to let you know they believe that the NFL is up to no good.
That's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. It's the right time on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks. No contracts. Mike, when I break into this, it feels like Deflategate all over again. I mean, obviously, we're not lawyers, but when we're having these conversations about legality and process, I mean, that's what it comes down to. We continue to talk about process, but ultimately, through this process that they're fighting, this is sort of what was collectively bargained. I can't wrap my head around it. And again, with neither of us being lawyers, I can't wrap my head around why this is going to have a different result than prior appeals have had. But I understand at some point that the Players Association's job as a union is to do everything in their power to defend every one of their players.
And you notice it's all happening very publicly because basically what's at the core of this, and now the NFL has come out and said, and this is Joe Lockhart, the NFL spokesman, came out and said this morning that it's unequivocally absolutely false that Roger Goodell was not made aware of Roberts' findings in the investigation. The idea, this is all direct quote, the idea that this was a conspiracy is false. The credibility issues were addressed at length in the investigative report. Kaya Roberts' points were made very clearly. The 160-page report included a fulsome description of the credibility problems of both Tiffany Thompson and Ezekiel Elliott. So in the simplest possible terms, the NFLPA is saying that the NFL conspired to knowingly withhold this information from the commissioner, from the committee involved in this decision-making process, and left this out specifically so that they could cast down judgment on Ezekiel Elliott, even though Roberts, who interviewed the witness, said that she would recommend no 0 games, no suspension in this. His voice could not be heard.
Adam Schefter, our very own ESPN NFL insider, talked a little bit about what the NFL wants. This is what he had to say.
The fact of the matter is there was one woman from the league office who met with the woman who's made the accusations. She did not feel that the woman was credible, and yet the league still went ahead and suspended Ezekiel Elliott for 6 games. The NFLPA now has filed that lawsuit in court in Eastern Texas to try to get a temporary restraining order. It gets very complex. It gets very legal. But the bottom line is the league and the NFLPA are at odds again. There's another potential court case. Again, it involves a star player. Again, we're getting ready for the season and talking about something that's entirely different again.
That's Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Simplest question, man, realistically, when we look at this in a week, no matter how this thing plays out, does it really become less of a story when we finally have actual NFL football to talk about?
No.
Really?
Remember how Deflategate went? That didn't become less of a story for an entire year and change, and we were talking about deflated footballs. This is one of the 2 premier issues facing the league and their poor press and their poor PR right now is this and head injuries. And you're going to have for one of the most prominent stars in the NFL potentially ongoing with this, because if they're granted this, if it comes back and we find out that Harold Henderson comes down and either reduces the suspension or upholds it, basically anything short of this suspension being wiped off the books altogether, it sounds like Zeke Elliott's legal team and the PA are going to try and file this stay and get this pushed back the same way we saw Tom Brady play that entire season with this carrying out in court. So you would have that hanging over their head this entire time. And so if the Cowboys, who would be whole with Zeke Elliott, have another good season, this is going to be the cloud waiting over all of this the entire time. And that's part of why the PA does this in public, because the one thing that's different about Deflategate is the stakes are higher here because the subject matter is a lot higher here.
Well, and the interesting part about it is we're arguing about process because that's the failing in this investigation for whatever reason. What none of us know, and what none of us still know from yesterday or 2 days ago or all week when we've been talking about this, what none of us still really know is any actual evidence that either side feels that they have on the actual allegations. All we know right now is that somebody said they wouldn't press charges or they wouldn't suspend, and that the commissioner didn't look at that. At some point, all of this evidence is going to come out, and that's when this is going to get ugly to me, because there's no way we get through this entire process without an in-depth leaking of the information that will happen from somebody that will tell us exactly why the league came to this conclusion, and nobody's going to look good in that process.
But that's the thing, is this about how it looks and if that pressure at all gets to the NFL, because at the end of the day, they're going to come out on probably the same side of this that they did in Deflategate, where because of Article 46 in the collective bargaining agreement, Roger Goodell has the power to suspend without really having to worry about any of this stuff. It could come out that they did jeopardize some of this process, and it probably still wouldn't matter all that much. But what the NFL's got here is enough to say, listen, her findings, the things she got from that interview, were factored into our big 160-page document. Roger Goodell saw that document. Everyone who was involved in this decision-making process saw that information in conjunction with all the other information and still made the decision they made. So while it may not have been heard directly, that's kind of the NFL's cop-out at this point. And then they can just point back to the fact that, like in Deflategate, Roger Goodell and the NFL are allowed to make these decisions without the burden of courtroom-level proof, because this is the collective bargaining agreement, and this is the one they've got.
And that's going to continue to be the chip that will be the argument we'll see is the collective bargaining agreement. Negotiations at some point will come to a head. This is the piece that I think we'll continue to see the argument about over and over again.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. This is The Right Time with Bomani Jones. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. ESPN Radio presented by Progressive Insurance. You can also get in touch with us. Hang out with us on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. He's at mgolickjr57, at mgolickjr57. I'm at Jason Fitz. And you know what, Mike? Last night, college football, it was amazing. Like, let's just be honest. There's a part of your heart that felt good when you're able to sit back, pop your feet up, and watch Ohio State struggle for a little bit and then wake up and get their work done against Indiana. There was a moment there where you sat down on the couch and you thought the world feels good, right?
There was the moment the night before when I sat alone in my home. I don't live with anyone. I sat around there on the couch and I realized that tomorrow night, not only would I have college football back, I understand week 0 the other week. I get it. I don't mean any disrespect to week 0.
They even call it week 0.
This was college football's opening night. And I said, not only will I have that, but no subsequent weekend will be without any form of football through February. And my heart smiled, and I said aloud by myself, wow, happy college football eve. And there was no one around to hear it, and I quickly realized how sad that was. But it didn't take away from the joy that I felt yesterday watching Ohio State almost lose for most of that game.
Shannon, he could have called us, right? Like, we could have gotten on a little conference call and just been like, hey, how happy is this? He could have shared that moment with us, right?
I mean, I would have greatly appreciated it.
I'd have felt loved in that moment. Like, we'd have been like,
I'll call Shannon next time.
Just Shannon. Okay, well, Shannon, call me afterwards. Let me know.
Maybe like James and Nuno, too. Can't think anyone else should be on that call. Nobody else.
This is why I drink. You know what? College football has instant gold status at Shell. Always join the Fuel Rewards program. Now you can join it with fuelrewards.com/gold. Get yourself some gold status at Shell. Here's the thing. It was great. It was fantastic. But it could have been better. And my whole mindset looking at it is I'm so thirsty for college football. I'm so thirsty for football that I'll watch anything. It doesn't matter what it is. I'll watch it. But could you not have put at that point, for example, the game of the millennium that we're now putting up with Alabama and Florida State? Why couldn't that have been on Thursday? Why couldn't Michigan, Florida have been on Thursday? Why not kick it off with a huge, massive matchup that every single, even casual fan wants to come in and watch?
I would agree at this point because for so long, listen, we wouldn't even get matchups close to this. I mean, this was the first opening weekend Big Ten matchup for Ohio State since 1976. Like, it had been a while since they were even playing a conference game opening weekend. So to have what we had last night was already sort of a landmark thing in their world. But now that we've seen a lot of these other cross-weekend kickoff or cross-conference kickoff weekend games, Alabama's been doing it for years. We'll see them again at work. Florida, Michigan. I'm actually, in week 1 especially, okay with this because usually these liberties are taken at the expense of the player. Like, no one really cares about the player in all this. We've firmly established that. You can move things around. You can do all that as long as it's going to make sure TV and everyone gets paid. But with this, you're coming off of the preseason. You can adjust your schedule. You might have actually, a few less days to get ready, but even that can be doctored with your schedule leading up. You've got so much time. I'm actually okay with this.
So let me ask you from that angle, because I'm always interested to hear, as somebody that played some of these neutral site games in general, when you're Florida and you've suspended what feels like 3,722 players for this game, it's actually 10. When you've suspended 10 players for the game, does it have more meaning to a player that doesn't get to make this trip and be part of this sort of a neutral site big moment on the opening weekend?
Oh, yeah, you're always cognizant of things that feel different. Like, even for us at Notre Dame, something as simple, we always wore very traditional, very much the same jerseys. So when we started breaking in the Shamrock Series, our special neutral site game every year when we get to bust out a different pair of uniforms, you kind of are uniquely aware of that. But you definitely take into account, I get to go play at X NFL stadium. I get to go play at, overseas when we got to play in Ireland. You always take these things into account. We played at Yankee Stadium my junior year for our off-site game. and they canceled our Friday walkthrough so that we could just walk around and fan out inside the new Yankee Stadium and kind of take a look at this palace and monument to baseball. So you're absolutely aware that this is going to be an experience that you can take with you.
Well, it's interesting. You're listening to Mike Golick Jr., Jason Fitz, The Right Time on ESPN Radio. ESPN Radio presented by Progressive Insurance. And Mike, I've always sort of sat there as an NFL junkie, and that's the beast that I grew up on. And as an NFL junkie, I always thought the first game of the season was almost wasted to make it a marquee matchup because I'm so desperate for football at that point that I'll watch anybody. They could put the Browns-Jags game on the first Thursday night, and I'd still watch the thing. But I found myself last night looking at the college football main opening event here thinking, as big as Ohio State, Indiana is, there's also been sort of a side chuckle with it when people talk about it, right? There's been this, Ohio State, Indiana moment with it. That you wouldn't have had that. You wouldn't have had that little tiny inkling of doubt if they had put, for example, the Florida-Michigan game out of the gates as the first game. I think in that sense, college football could have done a better job.
Well, think about what college football is all about. College football is all about the pageantry. You go to the NFL to watch high-level skill on display, the greatest minds of football going to work, trying to out-scheme each other and do all these things at the absolute highest level. And you go to college because you like the colors of the school. We like jump around at Camp Randall in the fourth quarter. We like Ohio State dotting the I before the game in the marching band. We love pageantry in college football. So why, in a sport that's so bombastic, that so embraces these outside elements, would you not put your crown jewel? Because you're not only the opening night for college football, you're the opening night for real, meaningful football. Like we played preseason 4 last night. I was watching Ohio State and Indiana while all the guys that used to be like me in preseason 4 are fighting it out for jobs. You don't get real NFL football till next weekend. So you are the lead dog for all this.
Isn't that part of what makes the weekend as a whole, too, so smart by college football? I mean, when you look at the rest of the weekend, the way they've spread these games out and they've put brand names against each other throughout the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and even the Monday night Georgia Tech-Tennessee game, they've managed to give themselves several different pockets where people are used to watching football, and they've given themselves brand matchups throughout. So I love that college football has gotten it right. As interesting as it sounds, I just think that they could have gone one small step further, and I wonder, as these types of games continue to grow, if that's the inevitability. They will try and grow one step further into it so they can give themselves more opportunity for marketing victory.
Yeah, it's what this always points to. We're always looking for the next way that we can get up a level, that we can raise the bar on all these things from an entertainment model standpoint, because that's really what this becomes. That's why we have so many of these fun pay-for-play conversations, because college football is, in fact, a billion-dollar business industry.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
This is The Right Time with Bomani Jones. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. We've been talking a lot about college football, and we want to go straight to the Shell Pennzoil Performance line. All of our guests join us there. One of our favorites, Heather Dinich, college football reporter, joins us. Heather, there's been a lot of conversation about what this opening matchup between Alabama and Florida State means in the playoff conversation. When you look at it, does the loser of that game suddenly find themselves in a precarious playoff position?
Absolutely, but we learned in 2014 when Ohio State lost, you don't write off any loser early. And they lost in week 2 to a lousy Virginia Tech team, went on to win the national title. And this is different because we've got number 1 versus number 3, and both of those teams have so many ranked opponents left on their schedule to overcome this loss. You look at Florida State, let's say they lose this game. They've still got a ranked NC State, ranked Louisville, ranked Clemson, ranked Miami. Oh, by the way, they play Florida as well. They could still be ranked at the end of the season if they get any guys back on their roster. But, I mean, look, both Alabama, too, LSU, Auburn, Tennessee is ranked, I think, number 25 now. They've got that SEC championship game to play another ranked opponent in. So, no, you certainly don't write off the loser of this game by any stretch. And this game, as far as the playoff goes, could set up several unprecedented scenarios because not only could the loser get in, maybe a 2-loss loser who goes on to win the conference championship could get in. And Jimbo Fisher has said that to me. He's curious to see what the selection committee would do if they drop this game and lose another close one.
And I guess that's my question, because we hear every year about the reaction to the committee's decision, who they ultimately decide to put in. Coming off of last year where Ohio State was clearly the story, the non-conference champion, getting in for the first time in the young history of this, what's the reaction been like around college football for coaches and schools now looking at this scenario and trying to read the tea leaves?
It's been, hey, we've got mixed messages. I mean, certainly from the Big 12. You look at it from Bob Bowlesby, the commissioner there. You look at it from his seat, and TCU drops from 3-6 in the first year. They think, oh, we got to get a conference championship game. They get a conference championship game, and Ohio State gets in without even winning its division, let alone the Big Ten title, right? So from the Big 12 perspective, they're saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then just talking to coaches, they're saying, what does a championship game mean? You know, it's mixed messages. And, of course, those guys say it should mean more. It should mean something. But the selection committee will say, look, it's not just being the top team or the top two teams in your conference. You have to be one of the top 4 teams in the country. So, yeah, the Big 12 can be a great showdown in this championship game this year. But unless you've got 2 teams from that conference who are among the top teams in the country, it's not going to matter much.
We're talking to college football reporter Heather Dinich. And I want to ask you about that. At what point do we feel like we're going to get 2 teams from the same conference into the playoffs?
Well, if you look at it right now, I would say the ACC has the best chance to do that, only because as we're sitting here today, heading into week 1, they've got 2 teams in the top 5. And this is a super long shot. But if Florida State beats Alabama and goes on to win against all those teams I previously mentioned, and Clemson beats Auburn. Now, let's say Clemson's only loss is a close loss to Florida State. Look, we just talked about an Ohio State team that didn't win its conference or division. Who's to say they won't do that with a runner-up in the ACC that only has 1 loss and an otherwise great resume? But I think in order for that to happen at all, Florida State has to beat Alabama and Clemson has to beat Auburn, or we're not even talking about this.
Heather, in that vein, as far as what it takes to get in this continued assessment of the criteria, Nick Saban unusually vocal this offseason about the desire to play more out-of-conference Power 5 opponents early in the season. We saw it work out really well for Ohio State last year, but Bama's been doing it early on in the season. Is this another thing that is going to start becoming more of a trend than less going forward now that we've seen the dividends it could pay for strength of schedule?
Well, it depends, because don't forget, Washington last year played Rutgers, Idaho, and Portland State, and they were in, right? But, I mean, they will tell you, the selection committee will tell you, though, if you're going to do that, you are taking a gamble with the rest of your schedule. I mean, you sure as heck better look like a top 4 team down the stretch and not lose to anybody you're not supposed to. If you're lining up against Alabama or somebody, you've got a little more margin for error. Yeah,
that seemed to be what we saw, at least by the indication of the rankings, because, again, we can remember that they got into the college football playoff, but we felt how tight that gap was between Penn State and Michigan that were sitting right outside and those last 2 out knocking on the door. So I think remembering the context of that is definitely important, like you said.
Right, and I talked to Oklahoma State coach Mike Gundy about this, and he said, look, I wasn't a big fan of playing Florida State in 2014. Right off the bat, they were the number 1 team in the country. From his perspective, he'd rather keep guys healthy, keep them less stressed, win those games, and then go out and take care of business in your conference schedule. And I could see that too. But again, if you do that, and then you're conference champion, and you're going up against another Power 5 conference champion that had a more aggressive non-conference schedule, you're going to be on the outside looking in.
We're talking to Heather Dinich, college football reporter on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And real quick, Heather, one of my least favorite arguments in all of college football is my conference is better than your conference, but everybody says it's important to the playoffs and the playoff committee. So in your mindset, is it more important to have a conference with a few great teams or a balanced conference that may not have greatness, but they have a more balanced group from top to bottom?
It's the most important. I'll answer this as simply as I can. The committee wants to know, who did you beat? And I think that's where we see their value for each conference, because they will say, we don't rank the conferences, we rank the teams, right? But you know how they feel about the ACC, the SEC, the American Athletic Conference by how many of those teams are ranked. So when we talk about strength of schedule, it's how many opponents did a team play ranked in the selection committee's top 25. That's what matters most. So when you look at what the ACC has, which all those ranked teams I mentioned, NC State, Clemson, Louisville, Miami, etc., versus an SEC conference that has traded depth for Alabama and everybody else, then I think that matters in strength of schedule. Now, if LSU and Auburn hold up to their number 12, number 13 rankings, if Georgia and Florida hold up to their part, if Tennessee surprises some people, okay, then we're talking about true depth, right? But I think right now the ACC has the edge over that.
And I think that's important just because I remember going through the committee selection process with you down in Dallas, and you're down covering that at the beginning and end of all of this. So you see this play out on that stage. And the one thing that I remember is, to your point, you're judging based off the teams that you rank in there, but that ranking process is very particular and it's very pointed at looking who these teams played, what are the strengths of those teams. So you're not necessarily as caught up in the conference bias because you're looking, all right, what is this team's given resume? What have they done on the games that I've watched and shown up in? And I think that's important to note because a lot of people can feel like this is sentiment seeping in. This is people's ideas of what they're looking at rather than actually diving into this. And this is a really in-depth fundamental process.
Right, but it's tricky, guys, because you know how it goes. So let's say NC State's ranked right now, right? Well, they lose to Florida State, they lose to Clemson, they suddenly drop in the rankings a bit, and the perception and the value of these wins changes throughout the season. And it's like, well, was NC State really not that good? Well, I don't know. They lost to two ranked teams, so they're automatically going to drop in the pecking order. So it's kind of hard to really figure out a true resume. But I remember a couple of years ago doing the mock, sitting next to Jeff Long, the Arkansas athletic director, who was the selection committee chair at the time in this mock, and he had a sheet of paper in front of him. And one of the things I noticed was just how much attention he paid to detail, specifically on his sheet blocks, wins versus ranked opponents, wins versus FCS opponents. I mean, he broke it down, color-coded, and the whole bit. So they absolutely pay attention. Who did you beat?
Always breaking it down. Heather Dinich, you can follow her on Twitter at CFB Heather. Watch her all over ESPN. Heather, thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, guys.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
This is The Right Time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. As you know, ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. We're going to get to the Celtics, Kyrie, Gordon. We'll get to all of that in a second. But as we went to break, we had some breaking NFL news. Brock Osweiler has been released by the Cleveland Browns. And Golick, I looked at it and I sort of said, okay, this is all. It almost feels like the Browns had a plan coming into this entire process. They had a plan of, hey, we're going to bring in Brock, and in the meantime, we're going to acquire a draft pick, and we're just going to see where things go. And I have no problem if he's not the guy they need him to be with just cutting ties at this point. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for the Browns, this is kind of what we all talked about in the offseason, right? Sort of like you see in other sports where the Moneyball tags are a little more prominent, the idea of buying a draft pick or just dumping a contract in there. This for them really came with three possible outcomes. I mean, what do you have happen? You take on that contract and you get the second-round pick in return for it, which they still get from Houston, by the way. They get that second-round pick for next year's draft. You get that, and you either just get that pick the way they are at now, you get a guy who can actually come in and start for you on that off chance for that $16 million price tag, what they still owe him this season, or you get a guy that ends up as a bridge player, and they ended up with the former in all this. They end up with the one draft pick that ends up as a sunk $16 million cost in the bucket that pick kind of mitigates for a team that's got a ton of cap space.
At some point, you look at it, does it make you nervous at all with DeShone Kizer and what the situation he's being put in there? I mean, is there any value that Brock can bring to a quarterback room? Is there any – I'm grasping for straws to find some reason why Brock can't be as terrible as we all think he is, right? There's got to be some redeeming – has he managed to fool this many franchises?
so far, it seems like that. It feels bad to say, like, this is a guy that for him has got to be looking around just wondering what's happened. Because it wasn't that long ago in Denver that this was a guy who people thought was pushing Peyton Manning out until we got to that playoff stretch where obviously things went the way they went. And regardless of the payday and the amount of money, this is a guy that I'm sure wants to and believes he's capable of playing NFL football. And so you look at it from his standpoint, he's looking around scratching his head. That being said, we all know what comes next, right?
Oh, don't do it.
We all know what comes next, right?
You can stand above. You don't have to limbo below this.
No, I'm just saying what we're all thinking, right? Like, as soon as this guy gets cut, we know that he's still getting signed before Colin Kaepernick gets signed, and we know the firestorm that's going to come when that happens. So I'm just putting everyone on notice now. Get prepared, like, strap in, enjoy what little down period we have right here before that eventually comes to pass. Because I already see on Twitter people talking about now, the Denver Broncos. Paxton Lynch is hurt. Need a backup quarterback.
Oh, my God. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. It's the right time on ESPN Radio. Mike, Cody Kessler stays in that locker room, and Brock Osweiler gets paid a ton of money. You and I had the conversation the other day of realizing when you peaked at some point, right? Maybe it's not the worst thing if you realize you peaked, and in the process you made that kind of money to peak and really never get it done. It just continues to stun me that people – and there's this moment where I – as a sports guy, I want to sit there and look at it and say, you know what, the guys that run franchises are smart. So it's really difficult. I understand drafting poorly because you're taking something and you're saying, how can I move this forward and what's this going to look like at the next level? There's a lot of variables there. But for Brock to get the kind of money and opportunity he's had, that just takes a lot of people that are bad at evaluating football.
Well, it also tells you how starved we are for quarterbacks, which makes that whole other conversation even more interesting when we talk about Colin. But it tells you how starved we are for quarterbacks because, look, you had a relatively small sample size, although compared to some of the other quarterbacks that are still talking about getting paydays. I mean, we were ready to give Jimmy Garoppolo money off 2 games and some preseason action. But with Brock, you had a stretch of, 6 or 7 regular season games where he performed well enough with an all-world defense that was eventually going to win that team a Super Bowl and some pretty solid weapons like Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas around him. And so you got enough from a guy that at the NFL level, you get people that fall in love with tools. You get people that are so confident in their ability to mold and shape talent. That's why we always hear, man, this guy's got a live arm. That's why people are always into that because they think, all right, I can take and mold and make and create something that's great as long as I've got this set of tools. And Brock has size. He's got enough arm talent for them to look at it and say, all right, step right up. This is going to be our guy. I can be the one to change him. They look at him like that bad boy that's sitting over in the corner of the yard that you see with the leather jacket and said, no, I can change him. I can make him better.
I still love the biker mentality around that. Like, it's just, I'm picturing, the big hog in the back, and he's just sort of leaned up against it. And
he's got that white shirt rolled up with the cigarette right in the sleeve there, and he pulls one out, and he lights it with his sunglasses down, and you're thinking, no, I can make him something else, and I can take him home to mom and dad.
And the fan base is the girl that's walking out, and the rest of us are the mom in the kitchen screaming, don't do it, you'll never change him. It's fantastic.
I wish you could make memes into meaningful talk radio because there's a great meme of the guy holding hands with one girl and looking at the other, and this is NFL teams looking at Brock Osweiler while Colin is the one he's holding hands with. This is incredible. Again, I can't wait for that to play out because we all know it's coming. Like, we're all fully ready for it.
Is there somewhere Brock can go at this point other than New England where nobody – I mean, because let's face it.
Other than New England.
I mean, let's face it. It doesn't matter who New England signs. Everybody comes on the next day like, oh, yeah, that's a good move by Patriots because it always works out. Proof concept.
That is true. Do you think if New England signed Brock Osweiler, we'd actually look at this like, Bill Belichick?
Yes.
Guy's got all those Super Bowl rings. Clearly he knows something.
You can't tell me with a straight face that if New England signed Brock Osweiler, that the next day we wouldn't be like, this is a sign that they're about to trade Jimmy Garoppolo for a heaping helping of draft picks and money, and they're about to just cash in because they're the Patriots and everything they do turns out wow.
Based on what we've seen, Brock Osweiler is either going to be the next New England backup or the next Alabama offensive coordinator.
Oh, man.
That seems to be the 2 landing spots for guys that need a little help getting back on their feet.
Can you find a spot in your mind? Because we talk, okay, let's just dip the tiniest toe into the conversation when you talk about Kaepernick, and we've heard of late, hey, you'd have to tailor an offense around him. I don't know that you can tailor an offense around the trash that has been Brock Osweiler's career the last few years. But is there a system that you look at off the top of your head and you're like, you know what, I could see him being a backup there and it would make sense?
Oh, I mean, we saw how much Ryan Mallett struggled this preseason in Baltimore with an off injury, a Joe Flacco that's still dealing with that back injury. That one that, remember, way back at the beginning of training camp, we were all led to believe Joe Flacco will miss a week. He'll be out a week with this back. He'll be fine. We've seen how it was just a couple of days at first. It was like, it'll be any day. Exactly. So there are spots that have had poor performances like that from their backup that you can, in theory, imagine. And again, quarterback is such a commodity around the league that I won't be shocked when someone again tries to take a look at this and say, all right, you know what, I think I can make it work, and given our situation, maybe this will do something. I don't know if it'll happen right now because we're coming off training camp where everyone else had a chance, but every team is looking at everybody else's toys wondering, all right, what do we do if this comes on the market? Do we like it better than what we've got, and how do we proceed accordingly if so? And I think we can all agree that no matter where you feel on where guys should be, we can all agree that when you look at the state of backup quarterbacking in the NFL, there's a lot of bad. I mean, there are just a lot of teams that don't have a good backup solution. And I'm a big believer in the future of quarterback in the NFL because I think there's a lot of young guys that are under 28 that have big, long careers ahead of them. I think that position, when it comes to star power, is as good as it's been in a long time. But the backup slots are just bad across the NFL. I'm with you. I don't know that I can look at it wholeheartedly right now and say completely that Brock's not going to get another shot somewhere. Jacksonville? Oh, my God. Like, this seems like this seems perfect. Jacksonville's sitting over here like, we have found our man right now. Blake, Chad, this has been fun, but it's Brock time. Oh, my God. If you're a Jags fan, I don't even know at that point. You just give up. At least the only thing he'd have in Jacksonville is his only job would be to turn around and hand the ball to Leonard Fournette and just see what happens. You've got that. I mean, the Colts are dealing with Andrew Luck still potentially being out for the beginning of the season. Is Scott Tolzien really that much better of an option? Like, these are all places where you look around and go, maybe they're looking a little longer than anyone really should at this point, because I don't know how much more proof we start to need along the way that, unfortunately, maybe this guy, and maybe backup quarterback is his lot in life. That's what he was out in Denver with Peyton Manning. Maybe that can be a place that he finds his way back into, but it's hard to ignore the burden of that price tag and the expectations it carried for so long for him. If you're just tuning in, the Browns have released quarterback Brock Osweiler. They owe him $16 million, but Cleveland gets Houston's 2018 second-round pick, even though it didn't work out. So this is sort of breaking news, because at this point, what we know, to your point earlier, is that the Browns essentially brought in a stopgap quarterback that could help them if they needed him. Deshaun Kaiser's played well enough; they don't need him, so they spent $16 million to give a little bit of safety and a second-round draft pick. And now, unfortunately, on the back end of this, part of me does, especially as a guy that was cut pretty often, start to feel bad for Brock Osweiler. Now, not too bad, because he's still making $16 million this year, but you're just sort of getting passed around at this point, and people keep being dissatisfied with what they're getting. And for a guy that probably coming off that situation where he sat behind Peyton Manning all that time and kind of waited, has to be looking up and going, did I squander my chance?
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
This is The Right Time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. 1-888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. As always, ESPN Radio presented by Progressive Insurance. Also, guys, hang out with us on Twitter through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. It's easy. It's at mgolicjr57, at mgolicjr57. I'm at Jason Fitz. Mike, the Celtics finally, the trade's done, so we can stop talking about the how's it going to come together, what's going to happen.
Woo!
But we get the introduction, and not much is typically said in an introduction that you can take away from. But this is the first chance we've really had to talk to Kyrie Irving or hear from Kyrie Irving in the process of this trade. Did he say anything? Because I look at this, and there's not a lot of things that he can say in my mind that open it up to some sort of analysis, or he can't say anything good or bad here. He's not going to change anybody's mind. I just think that this was the first opportunity for Kyrie to come out and speak, and as a result, I think he spoke well. I think he handled himself well.
This is exactly what you expected, especially coming off of LeBron James' very public tweets when this all first went down, when the original trade was announced before we had to deal with any of the minutia of all of this for the Cavs to get that extra second-round draft pick in a couple years, which we know they're really going to actually probably need because LeBron will be gone. But LeBron came out, was very positive, was very complimentary of Kyrie Irving. We remember he retweeted that video that was sort of mocking the idea of burning a jersey that just popped the thank you note down on top of the old Kyrie Irving Cavaliers jersey. And LeBron said, this is what it should be. Like, thank you to this guy for everything he gave to the city. Because he was their former number 1 overall pick after LeBron James left, and he meant a lot to that city during the dark ages before LeBron James came back. So now this is about what I expected.
In the process of the press conference, he was asked the one question that we all want to know the answer to. Here's what happened.
Yeah. I mean, you got a smart individual that you can learn the game from and be taught at the same time while growing. I mean, who doesn't want to be a part of that? That's just something awesome, man, that I can share knowledge as well as gain knowledge at the same time from not only the players but the coaching staff, and that starts with our head coach.
I thought we were going to whether or not he'd spoken to LeBron there, which that obviously didn't click there. So I think that at some point you're looking at this. We're still trying to find drama between the Celtics and the Cavs, right? In this process, that's what everybody's trying to find. They're trying to find some reason that there's going to be this deep-seated hate. I don't think either player is going to give us that what we want if that's what we're looking for
Until we get on the court.
Well, and then we're going to overanalyze whether or not they – I mean, if you and I walk through the halls and we just do like the head bob, does that get analyzed? Does that mean that we don't love each other?
No, it is going to be very clear how this plays out in the court because make no mistake about it, these two guys are going to try and gun at each other when this comes down to it. If you don't believe – we've seen how this has played out with the Golden State Warriors the last few years where they get on the court and how friendly are LeBron James and Kevin Durant. We see them. They played on Team USA together. They're guys that have been relatively friendly. And even they – during the course of a heated NBA Finals series, battled over everything that seemed to matter in the universe in one little jawing sesh on the court. You can't tell me that the rest of that Cavaliers team isn't going to look sideways at Kyrie when they meet up with this team. Forget just night 1 of the season when they meet, but down the road in the probably eventual Eastern Conference Finals we're going to get.
No, I think that we're going to overanalyze all of it. And yes, there's going to be some moment, but I think that the NBA is also – NBA players have figured out the way that we overanalyze it, and they love trolling us. There's no two ways about that. I think they're going to play it up just to make minds explode. This was the question he was asked about, has he talked to LeBron? This is what happened.
What's your relationship like with LeBron now, and have you spoken to him since this whole with asking for the trade?
No, I haven't spoken to him. And my intent, like I said, was for my best intentions and to look back at the amount of ground we covered in the last 3-year span, or even before that, because we had a prior relationship, and to really realize how special that was and how much growth happened in that amount of time. I'd be sitting up here and telling you guys a lie if I didn't tell you I learned so much from that guy.
I think, again, all being handled perfectly. Everybody's got their kid gloves on.
And you're believing it. And you're believing it.
No, I'm not believing it. I'm looking at it saying they're smart enough to know exactly how to play us. We are going to be played in this entire process. This is like, okay, Sonny, my wife, and I are we're huge horror movie fans, right? So if there's a horror movie that comes out, we go see it all the time, okay? And you know how much I love Halloween. When you go to a Halloween movie, you understand the ride you're on. I understand the ride we're on here. This is the moment where they both say all the right things. They talk about how they support each other. And then on that first game, we're going to overanalyze the way they look at each other. And I think they're going to play that up just to make our heads explode, just so that we all start talking about the drama, just so they can go back after the game and look at their Twitter. And I just wouldn't be surprised at the end of all of it if NBA players aren't sitting in a private bar afterwards, having a drink together, doesn't matter what team they're on, laughing at all of us that are overreacting to the way they acted towards each other on the court.
Listen, man, I understand that after Kyrie Irving's flat earth, what I hope was trolling, I still am not willing to let him fully off the hook for that necessarily. But you're basically discounting the idea that any competition still exists between these guys in the NBA, right?
No, I'm not saying
that seems to be more or less what you are debunking here, is the idea that there is any sort of competition, that any of the reports about LeBron James feeling blindsided and upset with this decision from Kyrie Irving were even remotely true, or that there's an ounce of competitiveness of saying that guy that thinks he was better off without me is all of a sudden not going to draw the ire of the people he thought he was better out with.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's not competitiveness. You put two athletes on the court, there's always competitiveness. You can't have two professional athletes in any sport can't even play video games with each other without yelling at each other. I understand competitive nature. I just don't think there's really ill will between most of this off the court. I think that we've blown that up, and that at some point we're buying all of it, hook, line, and sinker.
Hey, man, none of what we saw during the NBA Finals was fake. None of that contentiousness in the Eastern Conference Finals was fake. And if you think this is anything else but a log on the flame, I got a bridge to sell you over here.
I'm just saying, I feel like this is the equivalent of when somebody comes in and says, "Oh my God, did you see the news in Facebook?" Like, that's what I think we're doing. We're buying something we're all in it because it's fun and it's fun to talk about. But I don't know that I'm not buying that there's this deep-rooted hatred. And besides, at some point, if even Durant
I'm not saying it's a deep-rooted hatred. It doesn't have to be like, this doesn't have to be so like polar here. It can be, man, all right, this dude thought he was better off, bet. Like, all right, we'll see you guys opening night of the season, and we'll see how well that works out for you. And the first time LeBron James gets the chance to catch one in the open court or comes down the lane and Kyrie Irving is the only guy there playing something that closely resembles but not necessarily resembles defense and puts one down in the middle of the lane, he's not going to give him that same disgust kind of look that he gave to Steph Curry back in the day, reminding you kind of, all right, I'm still that guy.
Yeah, and then after the game, I think they're all going to go to the same lounge, and they're going to have the same – frou-frou cocktails in my mind.
What are all these lounges that you're putting everyone in right now? When's the last time you've been to a lounge?
I think that NBA players have, private hang areas in places where really tall guys can sit and hang out and be comfortable. And having just been in Vegas a few weeks ago, I think lounge.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz, and this is The Right Time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. All of our guests appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And we'll get right to this one because Golick and I are so excited for college football season. Our very own Ian Fitzsimmons will be on the sidelines reporting, covering the Alabama-Florida State game. Fitz, thanks for giving us some time. I know you're crazy busy. When you look at this game for Alabama and Florida State, the debate we continue to have is what it will mean for the playoffs at the end of the year for whoever loses. When you look at it, how do you feel about what it means for the loser?
I think this could be the year of the matchup, guys, and a rematch. And thanks for having me as always. I mean, these two teams, whomever loses, when you look at their schedules, could easily they have enough as far as strength of schedule to come back and make a run and get into the college football playoff. So I think whomever loses, if it's a close game, which I expect it to be, they're more than alive when it comes to college football playoff. So absolutely. And it's not just this game, because this could easily be a rematch in the college football playoff. USC Stanford could be a rematch in the Pac-12 title game, and the winner of that baby goes to the college football playoff. We know we're going to have a rematch in the Big 12. I mean, this could be the year of the rematch when it comes to not just conference championship games, but also you might have one, in the college football playoff natty. So, but this one, man, this is historic, guys. This is as big as it gets for an opener. I mean, since the AP poll came out in 1950, we have never seen a season opener that matched two teams in the top three. First time ever. And talking to Jimbo Fisher about an hour and a half ago, head coach of Florida State, he said, look, you could tell there was an uptick in tempo in camp because of whom they are playing. Not saying that it was bad in previous years. It was just in talking to strength and conditioning coaches over the summer, he said guys were putting in that extra rep. Francois keeping guys out a little bit longer in 7-on-7 because of this historic matchup. So. And folks, whatever your honey-do list is, go change the baby's diapers, take the trash out, cut the yard, get it done. Just be able to be on lockdown with your TV, a cold beer, and the remote in hand tomorrow night when this baby kicks on ESPN Radio and on ABC. It is historic, and it's going, I think, to live up to the hype.
Talking to Ian Fitzsimmons and the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And Ian, listen, I'm with you on the excitement in prime time, no less. And you mentioned DeAndre Francois, one of the quarterbacks in there. On the other side, Jalen Hurts coming off a stellar freshman campaign for him. What's the sense of expectations on both sides for these guys that I think are going to be heavily relied on for their teams in a way that maybe Jalen Hurts, especially last year with that great defense, wasn't exactly asked to shoulder the load work-wise?
All right, let's start with Francois and go to a position that well, and that's O-line as far as a position group. And Fisher just harped on this today when I talked to him, that it's not just the offensive line that got Francois beaten to a pulp last year. I mean, it was running backs missing it, a blitz pickup. It was a tight end missing a chip. It was Francois at times holding the ball too long himself. He said collectively, as a group of 11 in camp, they have been much better when it comes to protecting Francois. That includes Francois protecting himself by getting rid of the bleeping ball a lot quicker. So that's one thing to watch tomorrow night is that O-line and the backs, as far as blitz pickup, which Bama hasn't had, as you know, Golick. They haven't had to blitz a ton the last couple of years because of those freaks that they have up front, and they're loaded again this year. So that's one thing to keep an eye on tomorrow night. As far as Jalen Hurts goes, and talking to people that were at the Manning Passing Academy, the big question mark for him coming into this year is will his deep ball, those deep passes, will he be improved? Will he be better? Because that was the weakest part of his game last year as a true freshman. You talk to people like Archie Manning at the Manning Passing Academy, they said that their whole thing was, this guy can't throw a deep ball? I mean, he was one of the most accurate passers at the Manning Academy. Now, that's going against air. It's a little bit different when you got Derwin James lurking back there, hard-hitting safety for Florida State who missed most of last year with that knee injury. He's back. He's one of the most dynamic players in college football. But as far as his deep passing, that's another aspect to watch tomorrow night. Has Jalen Hurts, when you talk to people, truly, when it comes to now having full go and pads on, has he gotten that much better? Has he improved that much in his deep passing game? And watching one Alabama scrimmage a few weeks ago, guys, I'll tell you this, it was duly noted on my part. He looked a heck of a lot better throwing that deep ball he did last season.
We're talking to Ian Fitzsimmons on the show, Penzo Performance Line. Fitzy, I know we got a lot of college football to talk about, but I also know you've been very active in Houston. Tell me a little bit about some of the scene you've seen there as they recover from Hurricane Harvey.
I got to give my bride all the credit in the world on this one, and I greatly appreciate you, Fitz, asking about it. Dallas, where I live and I'm based, we were not affected at all. But we have friends and family that were affected in South Texas, and obviously I'm a proud son of the state of Louisiana, and Louisiana was hit as well, but not nearly as hard as South Texas, Galveston, Rockport, Katy, obviously Houston. And my bride came up with the idea just to park my pickup outside the gate and told our neighbors, load it up. Whatever you can bring over. If you want to PayPal her, I went to Costco with just enough. Put it this way, the donations from just our neighbors and friends had a comment in it, and we filled the back of my pickup up to the point where we couldn't haul anymore. Took it to a donation center, and the typical, and go like, you're going to laugh at this because both of you guys know me well enough. I'm in traffic, right? Like a block and a half away, 2 blocks away. And I'm not moving. I'm watching a green light, at this donation center in North Texas, and we're not moving. And I'm screaming at my wife, going, "How in the hell do you have construction, around a donation center? What in the other bleeping world is going on around here?" Well, it wasn't construction, boys. That was the line to the donation center. Over 200 cars and trucks lined up to go and donate. And when I got over there, man, it is amazing what we as people can do when we come together. When I of course, I cut in line and went around everybody and they cut through the hotel parking lot. Because I got stuff to do, right, Coach? Let's go, man. Let's unload this stuff. Let's help some people. That was what I was saying, right? My wife's going, "What are you doing? You can't cut in line." I'm like, "The hell I can't." But anyway, so we get up there and you're looking at Caucasians, African Americans, Hispanic, Asian. I think I saw a Martian. I mean, all working together, coming together, wealthy, poor, to help these people in need. It was awe-inspiring. And now that Harvey is gone and that is finally left and moved on, now is the most important time to help, because now we can start to the healing process. And having gone through Katrina, and that witch, just wiped out my mom's thoroughbred horse farm, forced her into retirement. She said, "I can't handle hurricanes anymore. I'm done with it. I'm going to the mountains." And having lived through that and dealt with that, people said New Orleans would never come back. Well, it's back and stronger than ever, and along with the Gulf Coast. And that now is the healing time. Now is when we have to rebuild. Now is when they need your money. So if you can, please, I implore you, text the word Harvey in all capital letters to 90999. That's to the American Red Cross. It's a $10 donation that goes onto your phone bill. That's it. It's that simple. It takes 5 seconds, and every dollar counts. Every diaper counts. Every pair of socks, whatever you can, because now the healing process begins. And having been through it, it ain't easy.
Guys, you can follow him on Twitter.
But it can happen, and it will happen.
You can follow him on Twitter at Ian Fitz ESPN, and obviously you're going to hear him all over ESPN Radio this weekend. Fitz, man, we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Always, boys. I appreciate you, man. Enjoy the games. Football's back. Life is good.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Fitzy.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
It's a Friday edition of The Right Time with Bomani Jones. I'm Jason Fitz. He's Mike Golick Jr., and we're limping through this one.
You know, you needed to save him right there. It's all you had to do in a situation like that. You hear the music. All you do is, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Right Time. You just got to hit him with one of those. The minute it stumbles, anything like that, just default to sounding enough like Bomani to play a vocal trick on everyone, and then remind him, it's just kidding. It's not Bo. It's us.
Well, I think it's fitting, though, because since you guys have obviously been listening to the show in its entirety, hour one, my microphone fell at the beginning, and I couldn't get it to make any sound as I chased it down the ground. So I think it's fitting that we start and end the show with perfect beginnings of the hour. So he's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. We've been hanging in all week, and I do want to take a second and say to everybody that's worked on this show all week, it's been a blast for the two of us to get to hang out, mostly because I'm awesome and, Mike's just along for the ride. But we really appreciate Shannon and Nuno and everybody that's been a huge part of keeping us from burning the whole thing down. It's amazing how many people we like at ESPN whose response when we're together has been, hey, guys, just don't wreck it. So far, I think, Mike, we've made it through.
Yes, and James and Kat and everyone else that's been around this weekend. It's been a lot of fun. Again, for me as someone who listens to the show pretty regularly on its own, to come in and get to pitch in a little bit while Bo is off doing his thing is much appreciated on our end. We've tried to fill it admirably. We'll continue to do it for the next hour before they finally kick us out and send both of us back to the morning where we belong.
ESPN, 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. You're always welcome to hang out with us, even if you just want to call and talk about how much you miss Bo. We all do. And you can also get to us through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at mgolickjr57. I'm at Jason Fitz, ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. So we've talked a lot this week about Ezekiel Elliott. Everybody has, obviously, as we continue to wait for the appeal to come down. But one of the things that really hit everybody initially a few days ago were the comments of Jerry Jones. And his comment was essentially there is no evidence. And when you and I talked about that in the beginning, we talked about the fact that was really a defining statement. That's the sort of statement you have a hard time walking your way back from if you're Jerry Jones, right? Because he came out and definitively said there is no evidence. This is all, a bunch of bunk. Now that you've seen some of this come out, what we find out today is that Jerry Jones acknowledged on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas his belief Ezekiel Elliott would not be suspended from earlier this summer came as a result of the NFL's lead investigator not believing Elliott should be disciplined. So it's interesting because that's a difficult thing for me to wrap my head around. If I'm going to stand up and say there is no evidence that Mike Golick Jr. Played blackjack in Las Vegas, I'm going to at least have talked to you and know confidently from you that there's no evidence. I'm not going to take Shannon's word for it and suddenly go out and make a definitive statement. It seemed weird to me for him to come out and say that's where his strong take came from.
Yeah, and so to hear him sort of walk it back today enough to say, I'll limit myself to when the time comes to comment, when the time is right and I'm able to comment to the full extent that I want to, is kind of probably what he should have said from the beginning, because we talked about there just didn't seem to be a lot of upside for him coming out and being as bold on one side of this as he did, just because it really wasn't him on the line just yet, but he put himself in that line of fire.
Yeah, and I think that there's a moment where you look at it and think, why didn't he handle it that way at the moment? And I think part of that's because of his love for his players. We talked earlier this week with Darren Woodson, and he talked about how maybe to a fault Jerry Jones comes to his players' sides, which in and of itself can be an admirable trait. But when you're talking about it in this situation, and when you're talking about what Ezekiel Elliott has been accused of, and when you're talking about this sort of controversy around it, it's a little more difficult for me to just say, all right, well, he misspoke. Jerry Jones, unfortunately, with everybody's platform, you get less opportunity to do that depending on who you are. I'm not sure Jerry Jones gets the opportunity to walk this back that guilt-free.
Well, we also don't give Jerry Jones the benefit of the doubt at this point. Like, we're used to him playing kind of fast and loose and speaking his mind very candidly. And so when he does come out and kind of try to give us this answer, this guarded answer after the fact, we're less inclined to believe it. And that's really been true for a lot of the parties involved in this. Like, it's true for the NFL in a lot of senses for them and the way they've handled these things. It's true for Ezekiel Elliott and what his offseason, his last calendar year in the NFL has looked like, that I think made the NFL more apt to look at him anyway when it came to studying this. I mean, look at the NFL and what they've done in all of this. And if they had just handled these things the right way, you talk about Jerry Jones and the way he's done things, the standard he set for himself. If the NFL just disciplines the way it promised to discipline, or the way it should have disciplined to start, which is harsh, which is swift, which is very decided and actively, when they had layups to do this, when you have Ray Rice with a video, layup, when you've got Greg Hardy with the grisly images that we get coming out of the legal proceedings there of a woman being thrown on a bed of guns and the pictures that came out of that, when you've got Junior Gillette and the video that prompted his release way back when and the suspensions that came there, all of which got reduced to some extent, all of which ended up making the inconsistencies pop up that we see now when you try and give Zeke 6 on the back end with a lot less known. So the NFL missed their chances early on and are trying to make up for it here, and now it sounds like there's a chance it could be another long, drawn-out process in court proceeding that ends up getting them burned because they tried to do it when it was less of a slam dunk and people were more inclined to look and say, hold up, let's think about nuance in the process here.
I think you make a great point, honestly. It pains me to say it, but I think that you're spot on in the sense that if the NFL had just come out from the get-go as they handled whatever their business is, if they handled everything with an iron fist, then you could look at that and say, okay, there's consistency in the iron fist. Don't love it, but there's consistency. One of the conversations we had when this first started about Ezekiel Elliott weeks and months ago was you can't let it get to Roger Goodell, because the minute it gets to Roger Goodell, you have no idea how it's going to go. You don't know what you're going to be facing once it gets there. And because of that, you have to be particularly careful in today's NFL to make sure that you don't put yourself across his desk, because that can be a very volatile situation to be in. If from the get-go they had handled domestic violence and they'd handled abuse situations, if they'd handled it with a tremendous iron fist approach, I do believe at some point you could look at it and say, hey, you know what? This is just the way the league handles it. And there is not a person in the world outside of your super fan that will you put them in a side argument. There's not a person in the world that's going to turn around and say, you know what? The NFL is just too tough when it comes to domestic violence. That's never going to be a conversation. They could have set that precedent from the get-go.
Well, Jason, if this is what people wanted. This is what people wanted when Roger Goodell initially got all this power. It's what the players wanted, and this is what, by proxy, the fans wanted. Because I said I was talking to Dan Greeny this morning on Mike and Mike, and we always hear guys, Dominique Foxworth is super vocal about this. Back when the CBA was negotiated and they gave Roger Goodell this power, it's because the players were tired of guys screwing up off the field that weren't necessarily getting jail time or getting legal trouble, putting a stain on the rest of the players in the league, where fans were looking and saying, that's a league full of bad guys. And they said, you know what? He'll come in here and clean this up. And for a while, that was what people wanted. So the NFL had a chance to be the guy that everyone wanted, coming out here and laying out justice in cases where we wanted the NFL to come out and show us all, this is how bad I think this thing is. And they botched it the first few times when, again, they had cases where you had videos and pictures and all things that made the process a lot easier to sell to the court of public opinion, and they didn't do it there. They sold you 6 games, and they undercut it every time with that little room for more clause they had built in there. And now that they're trying to actually, people point to and say, hey, let's explore the room for nuance in all this, it's too late because you've been promising 6 and you haven't been delivering.
Well, and at some point, even if they're in the right on this, they don't get any benefit of the doubt. And that's something we've talked a lot about all week, is benefit of the doubt. They can't get it anymore because they've been wrong in the way they've handled it so often. That's one of the things I think you and I have talked about a little bit that sort of makes me laugh, is that in theory, what we're turning around and saying is the NFL was too tough on this. And I don't think that you can be too tough if he's actually done anything that he's being accused of doing. The problem is we just don't trust the NFL. And we want to turn it into Roger Goodell, but it's not just Roger Goodell. It's the NFL as an entire group. We don't trust discipline to be handled properly. And because we don't trust discipline to be handled properly in a world where most players or most fans want to take their favorite team's side anyway, there just is no moment where you look at it and say, you know what? NFL's probably in the right here. I mean, there are very few people today hearing the news on Ezekiel Elliott thinking, you know what? The NFL has probably done this the right way. And we don't even know. We don't know how the court's going to rule. We don't know how they're going to rule in general with the appeal. But we do know that nobody trusts the NFL in the process.
Well, and this is what the NFLPA is trying to feed into right now. That's why you go in and say, we believe that this is a flawed process, one that wasn't fair and just in the way that it dealt with Ezekiel Elliott and all this. Because the NFL is just trying to recorrect now. They're trying to overcorrect for the mistakes of the past by looking at this situation and saying, you know what? We think there's enough here to where we can harshly punish this guy and probably make an example out of him. And we're seeing the NFLPA call into question and say, no, this isn't the one to do it. This isn't the one where we believe you've handled this correctly or that you've got enough to pin this on our guy, and now we're going to fight it. And because we don't have enough public evidence like you've been talking about, you're less inclined to get the mob on your side.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Mike Golick Jr., I'm Jason Fitz. It's the Right Time of Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. Golick Jr. and I get to hang out Sunday early morning.
Weekend Observations, check it out.
Weekend Observations is going to be particularly fantastic this week. We've already planned the whole show, so it's done. You won't want to miss a single second of it. It's already done, and I cannot wait. But in the meantime, I think our brains exploded a little bit a few minutes ago because, amazingly, you guys know this, the Cowboys filed a court declaration in support of the NFL Players Association emergency motion for a temporary restraining order. They're trying to stop whatever suspension may happen in the process. Well, when you file a court document, at some point, people get to see it. So we're starting to see some of what was in that court document. And this was written by Cowboys General Counsel Jason Cohen, and he observed the 3-day appeal hearing, and then he wrote, Elliott's 6-game suspension would, quote, cause the Cowboys irreparable harm. He said Elliott plays, quote, a critical role on our team, both as a leader and a player, and every practice and game that Elliott misses, quote, will hurt our team's chances of having a successful season and making it to the 2017-18 NFL playoffs and hopefully the Super Bowl. Now, the last part of it, we can all agree. No Ezekiel Elliott going to that's going to hurt the Cowboys' chances at a Super Bowl. Sure, we can, or the playoffs. We can have that conversation. But the statement that Ezekiel Elliott plays a, quote, critical role on our team, both as a leader and a player. Man, if he's a leader, what in the heck is going on in Dallas?
This, and I understand, preface this all, disclaimer, this is a very serious case surrounding some very serious subject matter, but looking at the hilarity that is this as a legal document that is filed in this suit, this sounds like it was written in crayon by a kid asked to describe the Cowboys last season and what's going on in here.
Yeah.
Ezekiel Elliott is my favorite player. I believe that he can help the Cowboys win a Super Bowl. It sounds like it's a school assignment that you wrote in crayons and broken English in here.
Which is fantastic to think that that's what was written by Cowboys General Counsel, Jason Cohen. How can you stand up and defend the guy as a leader? You can use all the rest of this, but when you say leader in there, you are slapping me in the face with stupid, and I don't like that.
It is. It's laughable. It's a farce. This portion of this is objectively laughable to everyone involved. I'm going to give you one thing, and one thing only that we've got is funnier, though. We've delved into enough serious subject matter for the day. We got this going on.
You can't resist.
The guys, no, we're doing this. The guys on the staff here have cooked up something truly, truly special. Maybe we're the only ones that love it. I don't think that's going to be the case, though. Take a listen here. We got a little musical number to help close out the show. You're gonna have dizziness, nausea, and swelling eyelids, and in some cases, chronic flatulence. So gassy, girl.
So gassy.
Man, again, shout out to Jerry just coming in here doing the damn thing. James on the board as well. Shannon Nuno. I feel like everyone played a part in this. This is in some way, shape, or form our own little boy band that came together here on the show, and it shined bright in that moment.
I'm going to say this. Why do I feel like next week Bomani's going to sit down and he's going to say, so how did those two idiots do filling in for me last week? And this is going to be the moment that he's going to be played. He's not going to be played any of the hard-hitting, smart content we did throughout the course of the week. He's going to be played flatulence. So gassy, girl. That's what he's going to be.
You're going to have dizziness, nausea, and swelling eyelids, and in some cases, chronic flatulence. So gassy, girl.
So gassy.
That might be it. We talked about peaking yesterday. That might be it, man.
You peaked. It's
like getting to do Boys to Men on live radio for a lot of people to see, and then getting it actually like cut and mastered by Jerry the God in the studio where he cuts the tracks.
Shannon, you have a lot of pull. You know a lot of famous people. Do you think next time Mike Golick Jr. and I are put together to host this show, which after the week we've had may be a very cold day down south, when that happens, are you going to get Boys to Men to come on and talk to us, maybe grade Mike Golick Jr.'s performance?
Oh, absolutely. I'm working on that right now, as a matter of fact. That's going to happen. It's going down. Trust me.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure, they only tour with 3 guys now because the bass has had so many problems with his back over the years and doesn't tour anymore. Just doesn't want to, I think. But at some point, Gojo, I'm thinking maybe you're the new 4th Boys to Men.
See, we got to figure out how we can sort of pull this through, because what gets interesting is, so my family's got a weird history of trying to bring our vocal prowess on air. Like, my dad's been notably singing on Mike and Mike for a while now. He got to sing on the air with that band that does all, like, the Christmas covers. I forget exactly.
Pentatonics,
yeah. He got to sing with Pentatonics,
by the way, who are spectacularly gifted vocalists.
Yes. So and he was right along with them, and he does very well. But a while back, his crowning achievement in the world of song and music was Darius Rucker, who's become sort of a friend of his and a friend of the family over the years. They made a bet on the women's March Madness tournament. Notre Dame was playing South Carolina. The Notre Dame women were victorious. So if South Carolina had won, Darius was going to get to host an entire show of Mike and Mike with my dad. And if Notre Dame won, which they did, my dad was going to get to sing one song on stage at a concert with Darius Rucker and his band, the Carolina Gray Boys. And so, at a show in Indianapolis, Indiana, Dad went on stage and sang Take It Easy by the Eagles, did a cover of that with Darius's band, and legitimately crushed it. Like, out of the ballpark, crushed it. We all sat there in the crowd as a family in awe. So now I've got to find a way to finagle my way into whatever version of that betting scenario lands me with Boys to Men on stage somewhere where I can publicly try and not embarrass myself fully in the way that I probably will.
So many thoughts here. Namely, I love the Darius guys. We spent about a year of life on tour with the Darius guys, and that's fantastic. I'm going to question Crushed It, though. I'm just going to question Crushed It. I mean, I've heard some of the Golick family vocals, and
there's a port on a western bay, and it serves 100 ships a day. Lonely sailors pass the time away and talk about their homes. There's a girl,
and there we go.
In this harbor.
I will say your dad got a little bit more of the vocal talent than you did, Mike. But I love you, man. I mean, I think you're fantastic.
Hey, listen, man, I'm a little hoarse. It's been a long day. We've been around here all week. It's an extra hour of radio than I'm used to in my day. I've had a cold for about a month. This is not an acoustic environment to ask someone like this. All right.
You said something earlier today about a craftsman never blames his tools. I believe you threw that out at me.
Yeah, the vocal cords are part of the craftsman. They're not a tool.
Oh, okay. Thanks for the head. I'm glad that I'm getting vocal cord lessons on what they are from somebody.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Mike Golick Jr. It's been a blast this week. Again, shout out to everybody at the show that helped make it possible and put up with all of our grief. Golick, you and I will be together Sunday, and the world needs to hear what's going to happen there. It will be spectacular. But you need to hear Jalen and Jacoby. They're coming up next on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. We appreciate it.
I have dizziness, nausea, and swelling eyelids, and in some cases, chronic flatulence. So gassy, girl.
So gassy.
Thanks for listening to the Right Time Podcast. Please come back Monday for more. And don't forget to listen to The Right Time with Bomani Jones from 4 p.m. to 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.